Hello and welcome to the Newchip Online Demo Week for January 2021. My name is Armando Vera Carvajal and I'm the Accelerator Director here at Newchip. We're excited to have hundreds of investors and entrepreneurs joining us here today from all around the world. For context, this is our biggest demo week ever. We have over 145, you heard that right, 145 global startups from the Newchip Accelerator sharing their stories this whole week. And their goal is to spread awareness, to share the insight and the context of the products that they are building and the impact that they intend to make in their industries, markets, and across the world. To kick off today, I would love to introduce you to Sammi Wong. He's a very special guest who was joining us for this keynote talk around startup innovation and investment in Hong Kong and around key geographies and hubs in Asia. Sammi, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Before we dive in, I'd love to share some details on your background, to share some context for the global audience. Sammi Wong is the founding member and leader of HKSTP Ventures, the corporate venture arm of HKSTP, also known as the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation. Sammi oversees all the transaction executions, portfolio strategy, and strategic partnership development. The AUM of HKSTP Ventures has grown by 5x through Sammi's 5-year tenure, which is very impressive. Now, the investment portfolios under HKSTP Ventures are deep tech focused. Specifically focused on verticals such as artificial intelligence or AI, autonomous vehicles, biomedical technology, semiconductors, and also material science. Prior to starting HKSTP Ventures, Sammi led Credit Agricole's Greater China Distressed and Special Situation Investment team. He has over 10 years of solid investment experience all the way from investment banking in the sell side and direct investments in Greater China, across Southeast Asia, and also in the UK. Sammi, it's such a pleasure again to have you here joining us today all the way from Hong Kong. To start this conversation, I'd like to delve a little deeper into the history and the context of HKSTP. Right now, here at this talk, we have many investors and entrepreneurs who may not be fully aware about this organization's impact and the fundamental role that it's played in helping grow innovation in Hong Kong. Now, the government created HKSTP in 2001 to foster the development of innovation and technology in Hong Kong. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit more about how the impact of this institution has made Hong Kong a different place over the past 2 decades, as well as the role that HKSTP's Ventures has played in this process.
Right. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for the chance maybe to talk to the the members of Newchip here. I know you guys are in Texas, a bit far away from here, but I think that through technology, I don't think it is that so far away as now we can have a conversation here, right? Maybe I think it's good maybe for me to give you a very brief history of the Hong Kong VC. And the staff history in Hong Kong, because that's linked to our organization as well. As what I think this gentleman said, that our organization is a statutory body. But unfortunately, I'm not civil servants, because we just set up by a special ordinance rather than by the company law. That's why we call ourselves statutory bodies. I think when Hong Kong returned to China in 1997, I think if you are old enough, you still remember that Hong Kong before was a British colony. And the first administration of the Hong government, actually, they think about what we shall do. Hong Kong, I think, gave people the impression that we are strong in capital market and are very good in property, right? It's like London, actually, in New York. And what we can do in technology. Maybe I can share maybe some screens for you guys.
Please.
Here you can see you can have a very simple chart about what the ecosystem of the staff and the VC in Hong Kong. Actually, I think it's quite similar to other location in the world. I think before 1997, I mentioned this point because this is the year that Hong Kong returned to Beijing from UK actually. Before that, the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong actually was pretty small actually, because I think you can find a lot of the bankers, lawyers in Hong Kong, but rather than entrepreneurs. And but I think the first administration, as I said, that start to think about that. So I think from the first a few years just after the handover to China, there are a few, I think, organizations related to technology sector that set up in Hong Kong by the governments. It's like our science park, this Cyberport and the ASTRI, we call ASTRI. Maybe I mentioned briefly what they are. Yes. The ASTRI, the ASTRI, I think it's like NASA in USA. I would say it's a government-funded R&D center. They hire a lot of research. Maybe they are locally trained or maybe from overseas, and they do a lot of the commercialization, I think, technology. Because I think the local university in Hong Kong, they do a lot of academic research, but their focus, of course, not for business, not for earning money. They are for academics, right? So I think this organization, this I think Applied Science Research Institute, is trying to do some of that. Is this some of the product they can commercialize, can create a tech sector for Hong Kong and enhance the employment in this sector. And to cultivate it, actually, the government set up two organizations. I would say the big incubators in Hong Kong. One is the Cyberport. I think is like here, right? Cyberport, I think is similar to Hong Kong Science Park, or we call HKSTP here, but our focus are different. Cyberport is more software driven. They are mostly focused on fintechs, on some gaming, which is I think quite a big industry in Asia, and focus on some blockchain stuff. They are mainly software, the SaaS model driven. And they cultivate some of the big tech company, I think regional office there, like maybe the Cisco, maybe the Microsoft are located in Cyberport as well. And of course, it's our organization, Hong Kong Science Park, I think is set up, that was set is 2001, about 19 years ago. I think that our organization actually is different approach as Cyberport. What is the main difference? We are not only software, we are more deep tech focused. It means that you can think about that in our park, you can find some laboratory, workshop, or tool stuff. You can think about that for that. And actually, our organization not just run the Hong Kong Science Park. We have 3 industrial park and 1 commercial building as well. The commercial building actually is located in downtown. We focus on fintech as well. And we cultivate actually the virtual banking in Hong Kong, like maybe one which is sponsored or invested by the China big tech giant Tencent, which is located in one of our buildings in Kowloon, actually, which is one of the park in Hong Kong. And we have 3 industrial park, which is for traditional manufacturing. But now we add some new elements to this industrial park. Is maybe say we are adding some facilities like called advanced manufacturing center, which is for some robotic manufacturing. I think we want to do maybe some high value manufacturing in Hong Kong. Of course, you ask Hong Kong can do manufacturing. Yes, we do. Traditional Hong Kong is a manufacturing center some years ago, but after China, I think opened the doors. A lot of the I think labor intensive manufacturing moved to China already. And now I think that our government want to maybe keep some of the high value or some of the product design or those maybe high value stuff in Hong Kong. So we need to prove that, and then we build a facility for that. And we have some big data center we just built, and we have some fabrication center for semiconductor as well. So looking to our science park now, a very brief introduction of our park. Now we have from the beginning of the first building to now we have 22 buildings actually. Most of the company in our park, they are deep tech company, and we don't allow, I think, tech company only have a sales office in our park. They have to do R&D. Now we have, I think, 850 tech company in our parks. Mainly, we have 2 groups of company in our parks. First, I think the tenants. You can see some of the big names are in our park as the, I think, the tenants, like maybe Philips Electronics, the TCL, the Aero from USA, the Fujitech from Japan as well. And we have some small to medium-sized tech company, maybe say they have less than 100 people here. And the other main group is the incubator. We are the largest technology incubator in Hong Kong. We have now host around 350 incubator in our park across 5 technology cluster, including electronics, mainly hardware, semiconductor. Second is healthcare, life science. And the third will be some material science, precision engineering. And we have some software company, and finally we have green tech as well. That is the 5 sectors that we think in Hong Kong we can excel and we can cultivate those companies to grow within our parks. So in mainly, we are quite different from Cyberport. We are more diversified in terms of technology sectors for them. And we have a few, I think, incubation program, and we have an acceleration program as well to tailor-made for different kinds of incubators. Some they are more early stage, some are more on the growth stage as well. And more importantly, we are equity-free, I think, incubation program, that because we are public-run incubator rather than private-run incubators for that. So that's important that company join here, they can got some of the cash and reimbursement to support their growth. Plus, we don't really get your equity. So unlike maybe those private sector like 500 staff or some SOSV, because they need to earn money. So of course they need to take your equity as a support of the operation. But we can support by our government. So a big difference for that. So you can see here the track from the late 1990 to the early Y2K. Actually, the tech sector in Hong Kong is like in USA, is really grow very rapidly. I remember at the time the NASDAQ, I think in USA grow almost to the peak around there. But unfortunately, you may still remember in the early, I think, millennium years that the internet bubble burst. Some of the big names like Netscape or some like AOL Online, they collapsed.
Yes.
After that year, yeah, you still remember that.
Broadcom.
So same as Hong Kong. We have some China.com, Tong.com, they collapsed at the time. So the burst of that and making that investor in the region more conservative in the tech sector, because when this is just when the government follow the US trend, just like I think the Bill Clinton time push all the new economy, all the .com become very, very, very popular for that. But afterward, it become the collapse of that, and people become very conservative. You see the burst of that, and the investor very conservative. And not just that, the winter for the tech sector lasts longer in around, I think, 2008. I think when the subprime loan crisis, if you guys still remember that, the collapse of the big investment bank like Merrill Lynch, Lehman Brothers, and Bear Stearns, that I think almost changed the other one of the world, and making the investor even more conservative. So around that time, it's quite really very conservative. It's like Hong Kong become, it's no way, because the government focus on the more traditional industry, of course, capital market and the property. And I think that this is the second phase, I think, in of the tech sector in Hong Kong here, just after the first phase here. I think this period of time is the same in USA. At the time, is more likely not very strong. But alternatively, I think in China, they are relatively less impacted. I think that I think in the Y2K starting, I think 2 big, I think, or even a few big tech giant, I think they operate like Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and maybe Jingdong JD. They all start around in the millennium year around it. But at that time, they are still very garage period, very, very small. You can't imagine at that time that Alibaba and the Tencent become a global big tech giant for that. But they actually, the beginning is start from that period. So China, big difference for that. And I think it was not until 2014 and 15 that when that time, I think you remember the O2O, online to offline that kind of business will become popular because Apple launched the first smartphone. People like to pay around the app and become that making that your life much more easier. So everything you want to put on app. So you have your EQ bond on that, use your app to book a restaurant. That start from that year. The same in Asia, I think in China, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, that people start to use smartphone. So that will be the government, I think it's the trend I've seen that we need to support again. So I think that the government start a few of the funding and the stock market. I think a lot of the change of the policy to support the tech sector in Hong Kong and actually in the region as well. That our fund HKSTP Venture that just mentioned them, which is corporate, I think, venture arm of Hong Kong Science Park, which we launched in 2015. So it is the first time actually the government, I think, related body to be a GP ourselves to manage our own fund. This is our fund one. Our fund one is not that big because it's a pilot run that the government wanted just to test the water. Hey, is it possible we do that? But it is very good that the feedback was really good. So not just I think we used 2.5 years we fully invest our first fund. And at the same time, the Cyberport, I just mentioned that here, the other big incubator in Hong Kong, they launched their macro fund in 2016, follow-on works to support with different focus in the tech sector. And later on, the government, I think one of the department is the Innovation and Technology Bureau. They launched their fund, it's called the ITVF. It is another government VC, but they are like using a fund-on-fund basis. They engage a few VC firm to manage for that. This is a lot of the new funding that often altogether that would be a few billion Hong Kong dollar put in the market to support the tech company here. It was not until 2017, I think this is another critical time I want to mention here. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they launched some new policy to support the tech sector. How can they do that? It's mainly two policy. The first is the launch we call the 18A biotech chapter. It means that they open a new chapter is on the main board of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange to allow pre-revenue biotech company to list. I think it's like a very like a NASDAQ versions of Hong Kong Stock Exchange for that. That would be encourage a lot of the tech company, biotech company especially, is to come to Hong Kong to list. Is to become a regional capital market. Of course, most of them is contribute from China. We can see that this cultivate a lot of the investor. They are willing to invest in the biotech sector because the Hong Kong Stock Exchange now offer very clear exit channels for the investors, right? The other, I think, the policy change will be to allow, I think, weighted voting rights company to list in the stock exchange because they want to attract some of the big tech company to list in Hong Kong. Typically, for startup company, the founder want to keep their control. Maybe they use weighted voting power. Means that rather than one vote for one shares, they have maybe just one vote. They have one share, but they have few voting power to keep the controls. Like maybe those tech giant like Tencent, Alibaba, they all follow this kind of the corporate shareholding structures for that. So keeping like that, this kind of promotion, we launched our second fund and the third funds after that. Still along with the COVID-19, I think around maybe since last year, but we're still keeping on investing. I think the change of fund, I think to take that we are taking more internationally. We are Hong Kong-based fund, but we invest internationally. So now we have half of our investment portfolio actually is outside Hong Kong, including Silicon Valley, Canada, China, Taiwan, and the UK. So we try to through our investment to have more overseas, I think, high quality tech company to land in our partner in Hong Kong and to supplement to making our ecosystem more comprehensive for that. So the role of the Hong Kong Science Park or will be not just for Hong Kong. We try to attract some overseas tech company to Hong Kong as the base, and then they can expand to different parts of the countries in the Asia Pacific. So it's a very brief summary what we did in the past 20 years. So
I think that's,
see,
I think that's incredible. And I think the emergence and just the development over those past 20 years has been remarkable, right? So much progress and so much growth and innovation across so many core industries. And I think what's fascinating is how, with HKSTP, that's like a little city, right? You have like all of these different buildings that you
yes, we are, yeah.
It's very, very fascinating. And it makes me think of some of the cities that are going up around the world that are planned, right, for innovation, for technology and entrepreneurship in Saudi Arabia, here in Texas, and Amazon wants to build one. So it's very, very interesting to see how Hong Kong already has a big step ahead, right, building this and experimenting within HKSTP. It's very interesting. When you were talking about COVID-19, you touched on it very, very quickly, but I wanted to go back to that. Obviously COVID-19 has been detrimental to a lot of the world, right? It's made a very big impact fundamentally across the board, but on entrepreneurs as well, right? It's been a challenging time. Now, 2020 just ended, we're in 2021 now. It's been a year, right, since the pandemic really started. What, in your opinion, has been the impact of COVID-19 over the past year on fundraising and investor sentiment in Hong Kong, but also the region?
Well, very good question. I'm sure that most of the staff were quite concerned about that topics. Actually, I would say some changes in both. I think the staff and the investor. From an investor point of view, actually, I think a few changes. I think I can observe. I think since Q1 of last year. Well, you may aware that, or may you agree with me that those very top staff company, maybe they are already attract so much attention from the investor. But if this is under the, I would say, normal period, say the economy is okay, everything okay, those I think some staff company, they are not the most, I think the most top one, but they are maybe in the mid range. They still have some investor, maybe they can write a check for them, and then we'll talk to them. But investors are getting more conservative because they don't know how long those maybe a mid-range staff they can survive, and what is their fundraising capability. So investors intended to pitch more for the top, I think, staff company, maybe some not necessarily unicorn, maybe something that they are even more expensive, but because more safe investment, they are intended to pitch for that. So it's making the funding gap is those company, maybe they are saying, I won't say they are not good enough, but just they are more mid-range in terms of the size, in terms of the development stage, not to the largest one. So maybe superficially, they are not the most safe, conservative investment choice. Maybe they have less attentions from the investor, I think in the past 1 year. And this is the first point. And the second point is, I said that is as a continue of the trend is investors getting more conservative, and because they already have some portfolio company, so they are intended to put money in their investee company first. Because if they don't put money, their company may got financial trouble right now, right? So they are rather than maybe looking at new deals, they will put more attention to save or maybe turn around or putting more resources to their existing portfolio company. At least that no need to write off or write down now, right? This is very, very common. Third would be their change of the investment focus. I think big investors, they still have the financial flexibility to look at new deals, but they are maybe, that investment is like fashion, sometimes more trendy. So maybe now they will look at some more, we would say, new normal, I think, sectors, like maybe suddenly become very popular, like healthcare, because now healthcare become a very, very driven and very, very concerned for most of the people on this planet, right? Sorry for that. And I think healthcare, especially maybe some like tele maybe consultation with doctors or something related to vaccine or some of the like can make you more healthier or maybe protect this kind of pandemic. That become a very hot and become a very, very expensive. And the second may be some of the logistic and some of the related transportation. I think like people need to do food delivery, right? So those are food delivery app, or maybe you don't need to go out. You just need to maybe put in this kind of app, order the food, and then the food will send to your home. This become popular. The other kind will be some of the e-learning, or maybe communicate like Zoom or something like we are using now, right? That's become a very popular because people can't go to work, students can't go to classroom, so what they're doing is just online. So those kind of virtual tools become a new normal. Because I think before the pandemic, who really think that this kind of not very deep tech of stuff, is this a big potential? But suddenly, oh my God, this kind of food delivery, the valuation drive up pretty much, I think, in the past, I think, few months for that. So whether you want to chase for this kind of investee or potential investment, it depends on, I think, the fund's style. Some fund, they keep their own maybe an investment theme, but some they will follow the trends. But my own philosophy is we take a balance for that. If we miss this kind of opportunity, maybe the investor behind our fund, they will complain, why you never look at this kind of I think a very hot topic now. But you need to think about carefully that is it they can sustain? Is this the pandemic will over one day, right? Is this after the pandemic still can keep the trend? Because investment still is over a few years, 5 years, maybe for VC. So my opinion, I think investors need to think about that. And investing for startup company, they not be too frustrated. If you're not in this, I think there's a few topics. I would say that you keep on doing what you're doing. And I think that you can demonstrate your ability to survive for that. And for startup company, definitely, I think that cash flow very importantly, because very uneasy to do fundraising now. So I think to keep your cash and earning money, I think it's very, very uneasy for that. So I think that for startup company, don't be frustrated, keep on going on to do what you're doing. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And it's also very, very similar to what we've seen here in the United States and in parts of Europe. We've seen, that shift, right? That you mentioned, a lot of investment opportunities that a year or 2 years ago would not have seemed ideal, right? They might have seemed very niche, not with massive potential, but the pandemic came and all of a sudden some of those technologies that you mentioned suddenly are the most essential and important, right? I think it is very important, as you mentioned, to keep in mind that the pandemic will end, right? One of these days, COVID-19 will be under control and the world will go back to normal, some version of it. And some of the startups that were in full swing during this period may not be the sustainable long-term plays that we might have imagined during the pandemic. I do think that the pandemic has helped certain industries, right, jump ahead. It gave them that push, right, to really demonstrate their fundamental value to the markets. Take, for example, remote work, right, where before the pandemic, a lot of organizations were really not willing to do remote work. They didn't think that it would work, but then the pandemic came and everybody had to, there was no option. You had to work from home. Companies like Zoom, anything that's related to online education. I think a lot of those technologies are here to stay, right? Long-term, like we're gonna build infrastructure around the remote work lifestyle and operational process, but certain aspects of it will go, right? I think also what you mentioned in terms of the conservatism among a lot of VCs is very true, right? You used to see it in Silicon Valley where they would basically just hand you out a lot of money to drive traction. Making money wasn't really the focus, but that's been changing. Some of the funds have stopped just looking at ideas with big traction opportunity and just focus on businesses that are going to start making money as fast as possible. And like you said, some funds have been not looking for new deals and looking to double down or triple down on their current investments. So that's very interesting that you've seen similar trends in Hong Kong and across the region. Sammi, I mentioned earlier that you have a decade of experience as an investment banker and an investor across Greater China, Southeast Asia. In your experience, why should more investors care about investing in Hong Kong and across startups in the region?
I think Hong Kong still have a lot of advantage over other I think locations. People always will compare Singapore with Hong Kong because we both are ex-British colony, English speaking, very small little city, capital market driven, and mostly are Chinese people, plus some Indians. It's very similar demographics for that. But I think our we are complementary rather than very competitive to each others for that. How to say that? Because Singapore, when we're looking at that, it is the center of Southeast Asia. So it's surrounded by emerging market. So I think they are the best choice for the maybe Malaysia, Indonesia, or maybe some Indo-China country like Vietnam. They moved there to maybe get listing there because the investor there, they are very similar culture because people, I think in Singapore, they speak Bahasa, right? Which is the national language of Indonesia and Malaysia. So I think that this kind of the mix of the people there, then easier for them to understand maybe the project in different regions. So I think it's very common that for the Southeast Asia based, I think investor, they will look for project obviously in that region rather than move to North Asia, a bit far away in terms of portfolio management. Hong Kong, right, is different, is a part of China and just very next to China. In terms of location, is which is I think the center of North Asia, right? And Hong Kong, I think, is very special political system we call one country, two system. You would say it is part of China. To a certain extent, it is not part of China because in the part of China means that we still influenced by the Beijing in terms of certain things. We still get support from the China government, but we still use the British law system. We still keep the common law system in Hong Kong, which is inherited from the colony time. Yes. So it's very special. Then I think that for foreigner, I think it will be easier to understand how it's going on here because the common law system is used in most of the Commonwealth country, including United States, right? So I think that for the US investor to come to Hong Kong, it's very easy to understand some of the same concept or what will be the difference. It will be very minimal. And for IP protection, I think doing here will be we follow the same system with getting maybe a more comfort from that. And more than that is I think it's over other region is more international here as compared here. China is big, but for foreign, I think go straight to China still have some hesitation because of the language of the different legal system, political system as well. So it's a very good stepping stone for company to maybe set up something in Hong Kong and then gradually move into China. And Shenzhen, I think the big tech hub, I think in China, just 45 minutes from our park. I think we take this kind of advantage. And Hong Kong, of course, is much bigger capital market than China because China is still a closed financial system for them. So Hong Kong, I think the Beijing government intend to keep Hong Kong at this kind of a very open door policy to attract money and capital and debt. In terms of wealth management, private banking, I think that Hong Kong is still much better than China. Even that you say Shanghai is growing up capital market, but they are still in closed system and RMB is still not freely convertible, right? It's unlike Hong Kong dollar. And you can use very freely US dollar in Hong Kong, so it's quite different. In Taiwan, traditionally, they big company like to list in Hong Kong because the Taiwanese stock market is pretty small, right? If you go to Korea and Japan, you need to know Korean and Japanese language rather than just English. But Hong Kong, I think, start as compared to that. So I won't say that Hong Kong and Singapore is really very compared to each other, but quite complementary to each other. I think that's my thought, yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think the language part is huge, right? Just having English, which is one of the main languages for just international business, is core for drawing foreign investors, but also entrepreneurs, right? Who may want to domicile in Hong Kong. And I think you forgot to mention the dim sum. Dim sum is a big part of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely love it. If you had to pinpoint one area for major growth, where would you say is the biggest opportunity for startup communities in Hong Kong right now?
I would say that healthcare and life science, I think, would be the segment of the tech sector. I think Hong Kong can excel very well. I tell you why. Hong Kong have two very, I think, renowned medical schools. And that two medical schools, they have a clinical trial center. And their data, I think from the clinical trial here, I think accepted by FDA, EU, and the CFDA in China. I think you cannot find a location in the world you can acceptable by those three big, I think, economy in the world. So I think that for some therapeutic company, it's very nice for them to do some clinical trial, especially for phase 1. Of course, you will argue that FDA, they need US local data. That's true. But doing clinical trial in US is so expensive, right? So actually some US startup company, they do the clinical trial to phase 1 in Hong Kong. And because of big population in Hong Kong, it's quite easy to recruit patients here. We have 7 million ready for you. Of course, not all of them are patients, right? But still, you are more scattered in USA. Even for example, we invest a surgical robotic company, which is spin off from Imperial College London. In UK, of course, they can recruit patients, but the system relatively slow and relatively more scattered the patient. That's why they set up something in Hong Kong and easier for them to get some patients for clinical trial. And the more important thing, they want to go to China. And if you do the clinical trial in UK, those data are not accepted by Beijing. But if you do the clinical trial in Hong Kong, those data are acceptable by Beijing. That's the main difference, I think that.
And that's a big deal. I think the opportunity for that is massive, right? And
Yeah. The other thing I want to share could be like some technology. You don't really need a lot of the land. Hong Kong, I think we don't have its land, very scarce resources because it's a really small city. For those, maybe it's like doing some material science, life science, or something like doing some like IC design for semiconductor industry or some IT AI company. I think Hong Kong can do quite well for that. If you do some very mass production, okay, sorry, we can't really do it because we don't have such a site as comparable with China. Yeah, so I think that's those things I think we can accept. And the university in Hong Kong, they are not bad. I think 4 of our universities are top 100 in the world. So I think that their R&D is pretty good. So I think that a lot of the recruitment of talent, I think, shall not be a big issue if you really do R&D in Hong Kong.
Yes, no, and absolutely 100% agree. I think when I think globally about R&D, Hong Kong is one of the places that immediately comes to mind. Hong Kong, Singapore, among other core places in the world. All things considered, where do you see the future of entrepreneurship over the next 10 years in Hong Kong?
I would say that the entrepreneurship has been growing, not just now, and in the future as well. I'm quite optimistic and positive about the entrepreneurship for the next 10 years because young people, their mindset are changing. I myself lecture some classes in local university. When I talk to them, I can feel that they have the strong mindset that I want to do my own project, own ventures. And the VC sector, I think that in the past, I think 10 years, I just shown you this increase pretty much for that. I think cultivated by the government, and very important is the mindset of the young people change. Maybe before, even in my generation, right, that people love to do banking or lawyer after they graduate because it seems more stable income is but that. But now I think the young people, they are maybe getting, they're getting more exposure to different part of the world. They feel the atmosphere, what United States or what other European or young guys doing. They found that it's even more cool if they have their own new ventures, right? So it's quite different. And the local university, they cultivate pretty much of their students to commercialize their project. For example, we invest in some project. They are really the spin-off from local university. What they are doing actually just their PhD, I think the paper. They commercialize what they did in their few-year PhD. It's what like cool because it means they never waste their time. They use their PhD, they research, and then maybe they use their PhD paper to get a start and getting successful with some funding and become their career. I think that is one good example for that.
That makes perfect sense. And I think, like you mentioned, the mindset is very, very important. Obviously, here in the United States, becoming an entrepreneur, launching a startup is like being a rock star, right? Now launching a band in a garage back in the early 80s and 90s. I'd like to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship itself, and get your perspective on some fundamental aspects of building a startup today, specifically in Hong Kong and in the region. In your opinion, as an investor, what are the key skills that you need to succeed as a CEO of a startup, especially in today's super fast evolving and super competitive marketplace?
CEO, I think that at the very beginning of stage, it likes to be everything. I think that, especially when you are 2 or 3 people's team. First, if you are the technology owner for that, say I would say a deep tech company, you need to think about, are you okay or are you the best guy to be the CEO? Because are you maybe rather to be the CTO for that? Because many of the college they think that, oh, I invent that technology and then I will be the CEO of that startup company. It may not be the correct answer for that, for all the cases. Of course, some scientists, they are really a good CEO, but not all of them. Because the mindset of a scientist training and a business training is a bit different, right? If you agree with me. So I think the mentality is that I think the CEO, he need to have very long-term planning strategies, what the company will do in the future. And he could be the glue, I think, that to coordinate and stick the team together. He need to identify the right partners maybe for the team, and to see how to divide the job with that. Some of the CEO, especially staff, they just try to do all the work by himself or herself. That's wrong, because you only have 24 days a day, right? So what you do, you need to delegate. But some CEO maybe I don't really trust that. So I think building a team at the very beginning will be very, very important. So vision, team building capability, people skill, and the first skill is selling skill. Selling skill in what? You need to sell your idea to investor, selling your business partner. If you don't have good selling skill, I think that would be not very nice to be a CEO, I would say. But not perfect, but not all CEO are perfect, right? So I think that these 3 points are identified. If they have all of them, then we're perfect. But sometimes when we invest, we will see how much they can do in 3 of these elements.
Yes, no, and that makes perfect sense. You know, we see that all the time as well. I think the CEO that wants to do everything, right, or take on too much. I think in the beginning, right, when it's just you, or like you said, a group of 3, it makes sense, right? You wear so many hats, but a big part of growth and achieving success and scale is delegating, as you said, just delegating and building a team, right? Because we think that the main job of a CEO at a startup, it's 2 main things. It's fundraising and it's building teams, right? And if you're not doing those 2 things, you're probably not growing to where you need to go. And you know, off of that, I know you mentioned some of the 3 skills that they need. What would you say is the most common mistake that you see startup founders make nowadays?
Too passion, I would say. Passion is a good thing, but when you become too passionate, sometimes if the business idea that they thought before is not really working in the practical world, if they are too passionate about that, means that they don't want to change. So that would be a problem. I think that is the biggest problem I came across, I think, in the past few years. Because pivot, I think, is a very important skill for CEO. But if they hate or they are not willing to pivot, I think the investor just put the money into the sea. So that would be a very disaster sometimes. But all the founders are passionate about the idea and technology. There's no doubt. Otherwise, they won't found their own company. So this is like the 2 sides of a coin, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think you have to have passion, right? Especially if you're building something that is very risky but has high potential. But at the same time, if you're too married, right, to the idea and you're not willing to adapt, right? Especially this past year, right, with COVID-19, if you weren't willing to adapt and make some changes and pivots, if it wasn't an investor telling you to change, it was just the world, right? The market forces forcing you to either change, adjust, or putting your business out.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why sometimes the investor will push some of the founder to step down as CEO, because the founder may be at different stage of the company. Who could be the CEO will be a different candidate. At the beginning, maybe could be the founder, but maybe after a few years, maybe the growth stage, sometimes the investor, they will hire the other guy as the CEO. It's for the overall best choice for the company. It's not an easy choice, because sometimes they are the very how to say, the icon of the company, the founders. But if you let them step down, like maybe Steve Jobs many years ago, that he left Apple, right? It's icon. So it's not a good choice. Investor normally won't do that, but to a certain stage, if have to do that, I think we have to do that. Yeah.
And that makes sense, right? There's always going to be a time. I mean, Steve Jobs is, like you say, that very specific case, but that's because a lot of the goodwill of Apple was with Steve Jobs, right? Without Steve Jobs,
Exactly. Yeah.
it wasn't really an Apple. You could almost say the same about Zuckerberg for Facebook, almost the same about Elon Musk, right, for SpaceX and Tesla. They're very important parts of the brand that they built. One question that I had for you, and you know, specifically in your position at HKSTP Ventures, you know, you have the opportunity to see a lot of different deals. You have the opportunity to meet a lot of different founders and entrepreneurs. Obviously, when you're considering a potential investment, there are many factors that come into consideration. You perform the standard due diligence, but what do you personally look for in an entrepreneur before making that final decision? Like, what's the one thing that typically will get you to say, yes, I want to invest in this founder?
Team quality. I think the most important thing, because at the very early stage, normally for our first fund, we did a lot of the very early stage investment. Actually, those financial to see, even the product is not yet burned, right? But I think that that's very important. If the team quality is this, they have the passion, and they have the good idea, they have good communication skills, and how the team chemistry is it that team. I think I will see that in the next few years, do they can work together, have the capability to execute the business model they propose. I think that's the key thing. Normally, we will do many rounds of interview, and even observe them over quite a few months before we really make the decisions. So the first time we met them, we don't give the check, right? But after quite a few times, and over the time, maybe they need to prove that they have the track record. Because I will expect for a startup company, just a few months, they can have a lot of changes. If after a few months I see them again, they tell me that they are still similar stage, I will think that what are they doing? Right? You see what I mean?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think the team, right? The team at the end of the day, for a startup, the team is what holds that vision, that opportunity together. And I think for an investor, right, it's absolutely important. It's critical to make sure that you have the right team in place. And you mentioned earlier that different stages of the startup, sometimes the team's going to change, right? As you start to grow, as you start to, get into bigger markets, you have to bring in people who have more experience. And I think that's a normal part of growth, part of the growing pains and adjusting to new stages in the company. But nonetheless, team is super important for sustainable success. Sammi, the last question I have for you, and this is a very important one for us here at Newchip. What advice would you give the entrepreneurs who want to change the world?
First, I think you want to change the world means that you have the heart, you want to support people. So my advice is be realistic. Of course, what I mean that you can have a plan that, okay, we can set up an immigration agent to move people to Mars. So do you think it's practical? It's not practical, right? So you need to something that down to the earth, that you understand the pain point in the market of what people they are facing now. This is very realistic solutions. If I think one step they can really disrupt it enough, what I mean, if they can really doing something really realistic. Realistically, they can maybe support people to solve some pain point. That's my major opinion, actually.
Yeah.
Very important. Yeah.
It's absolutely important, I would say. I think that's something that we drive home a lot here at Newchip. You know, what is the problem that you are solving, right? And it needs to be a real problem, right? The real need that you are actually solving. Otherwise, you don't know if you can make the world a better place. But
Yeah.
it's very, very true. Having that degree of realism is essential, right? Sending people to Mars is nice, but how many problems is that going to solve today or next year or within the next 10 years, right?
Yeah. I share with you that I met many scientists or maybe professor from college. They are doing many great things around the world. But sometimes I'm thinking that, is this they're making their own toy or they are really making something very realistic? They want to commercialize their project. If they're only making their own toy, their project, I think we should not invest because it may not have medical applications, right?
Exactly. And I think that's so important, right? It's a big part of the journey as an entrepreneur, as a founder, understanding in that product market fit, right? Is it something that's just for me, right? You might have a real problem that you're fixing with the toy, right? But is this something that has an addressable market, right? Do hundreds or thousands or millions of people have that same problem? And an investor cares at the end of the day, can you make money, right? That's
Yes, true.
a big indicator. But yeah, Sammi, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, to do that. And thank you for maybe the chance for us to maybe to share some what we are doing in the Asia. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure having you in this conversation, and you know we look forward to working with you over the coming years. And we encourage everybody in the audience who's seeing this, consider Hong Kong. It's a beautiful place. I've been there a few times. Very advanced.
Thank you. Yeah. We do have I think a big incubations programs for your members as well. So let's see. I hope we can work together. Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this talk.